Recently, the Derby Telegraph were kind enough to include a feature about our 25 years in business. It said that if readers were at work, the chances were that they were in a property that had been at the centre of a transaction that had involved yours truly. That might have been stretching a point a little and would certainly include the many years before I set up my own business. Have I really been around that long? So I thought it might be a bit of fun to look at some of the changes over the last quarter of a century, and particularly some of the buildings which have made a mark on me and some upon which I may have made a mark. One of the most iconic buildings in Derby stood right here. This is the old home of Derby County, which certainly made a mark on me, most notably when the all-conquering Real Madrid were beaten 4-1 by the Rams in that great European Cup tie.
Todd, ball by Bolton in the Real half. Here's David Nish. Gemmell. George! Oh, I say cracker! Applause all around the ground, and my word, he deserved it. That's as good a first-time shot.
And it shouldn't be overlooked that I made my mark too. Having played there a few times for Derby boys, I did take the occasional piece out of the opposing centre-forward's ankles. So it was certainly a bittersweet moment when we were asked to sell the baseball ground, particularly with the knowledge that it would be bulldozed and redeveloped. We had been busily acquiring land around the ground when I received the call from Peter Gadsby to say that the club had decided to move rather than rebuild. It certainly took me by surprise, but the club's change of heart went on to play a central role in what must be one of the most successful regeneration projects the city has ever seen. The magnificent new stadium, which replaced the baseball ground, was opened by the Queen, projected Derby County into a new era, and by sharing its name, it helped to put the wider 180-acre Pride Park regeneration scheme on the map. Pride Park now is the home to 200 businesses, as well as the football club, and is well known nationwide. But despite Lionel Pickering's generosity, funding the new stadium wasn't plain sailing. Derby City Council were reluctant to permit a Rico Arena style development with retail park and exhibition hall, which would have generated a significant contribution towards the cost. Instead, they would only allow leisure type uses. In pursuit of highest value, we managed to secure a 100,000 square foot letting to JJB Sports for a soccer dome, but only after I had to go to Wigan to convince Dave Whelan of Pride Park's potential. Pre-lets to Frankie and Benny's and Subway followed, and we sold the development to a funding institution to release capital for the football club. Over 10,000 people are now employed on Pride Park, which makes it the most significant property story in the past 25 years. It is not the large industrial estate originally planned, but a mixed-use development based more on offices and leisure, and boasting household names amongst its occupiers, including Rolls-Royce, East Midlands Trains, Webhelp, and Salloway Property Consultants, to name but a few. I am delighted to say we have done more than a few deals on Pride Park, as well as locating our own offices here. Derby County Stadium is not the only iconic building to sit on Pride Park. With its imposing structure clad in bronze, silver and gold, the velodrome is a true legacy of those great 2012 Olympic Games in London. But much as its appearance is impressive, the viability of the velodrome, or is it the arena, or is it Wilkinson's Folly, leaves many questions unanswered and a few red faces in the council house. I suspect there is a steep ascent with several twists and turns ahead. There are no embarrassed officials where the Roundhouse is concerned. The refurbishment and extension of this Grade 2 listed building is an excellent example of how new and old can be combined. I compliment Derby College on their vision and the construction team who made it happen. It is a long way removed from the derelict building I measured up for the privatisation prospectus for British Rail. Ah, the council house. I'm still licking my wounds. I had a client who was bidding to build a brand new bespoke headquarters for the council on the site of the old police station on Full Street. I was convinced it was in pole position and I was very excited. Enter stage left, the new Chief Executive of Derby City Council, Adam Wilkinson. Despite my protestations that he couldn't turn a sow's ear into a silk purse, he persuaded councillors to vote for refurbishment of the existing council house rather than relocate to new offices. Derby Suits on the Streets strategy desperately needed a new city centre office development to get off the ground at that time, and the council blew it. I was crestfallen. I was so keen for this to happen for the economic benefit of the city centre, and I suppose missing out on a substantial six-figure fee did nothing for the economic benefit of Salloway's either. Somewhat with gritted teeth, I had to admit to Adam that I was wrong about the sow's ear. The building looks great. However, he will always be my pantomime villain. For another example of how publicly funded projects have helped shape the city's profile, then look no further than the University of Derby. We sold them the old Moore and Eady premises on Mackworth Road, the old Chalful toy factory on Pybus Street, and the former Lonsdale travel offices on Lodge Lane. These have all been skillfully refurbished and redeveloped for university use. Then there is the relatively new Enterprise Centre on Bridge Street, and, most recently, the new law school here in the Copper Building. Its design is a bit Marmite in terms of opinion, but it is the only office building to have been speculatively erected in the city centre since before Salloway started in 1993. Therefore, it was a difficult one for us to value for Derby City Council's regeneration fund requirements. There is a commonly held view that if a building is quirky and difficult to let or sell, the university will step in. So I wonder when they might be asked to look at the velodrome, or the bonded warehouse on Frygate, or even the old hippodrome. I did try to persuade them to move their main campus into the city centre and put Tesco on the Kedleston Road campus, but it didn't get much traction. The biggest single private investment into Derby in the last 25 years was the Westfield Shopping Centre, or Into as it is now. It came when the city was very short of quality retail space and when demand was strong. It was supported by the Planning and Development subgroup I chaired for the Chamber of Commerce at that time. Despite having reservations about its location, we felt the need for Derby to provide additional quality retail space was justification in itself. Interestingly, there was another scheme on the cards at the time, in arguably a better location. Clowes Developments and P&O were promoting the redevelopment of Duckworth Square and Green Lane, linking through to St Peter Street and Victoria Street, but they were thwarted by complex land assembly issues. The good thing about the Westfield scheme was that it resulted in the redevelopment of the old main centre and the demolition of the old striped registry office. But I do wonder how the city centre might look now if it was the Clowes P&O scheme that had been built. Just across the way from the Into is another major private sector investment, Riverlights. This was developed by a fellow old Derbian and friend of mine, David Osborne. He was based in Reading and funded largely by offshore investors, but his specialism was in hotel development. He wanted to be considered for the redevelopment of the old bus station, but couldn't get a place at the table. So I cajoled Ray Cowlishaw, Derby's chief executive at the time, into including David on his shortlist. And the rest is history, as they say. A spectacular building with a very impressive frontage to Moorledge and 2 hotels and a bus station within the scheme. We have been involved in many regeneration projects down the years, and the former Dracker Cable site is a classic example and one of the many similar schemes undertaken by Ivy Grove Developments, who have banished the old and brought in the new. Industrial cables had been made at the Old Fritton Road property for 85 years, but sometime after falling into the hands of Italian owners, Prysmian, the site was closed down with the loss of 200 jobs. Once the vendors' price aspirations became more realistic, we were able to strike a deal for Ivy Grove to buy the site. There were some deals already in the bag before Ivy Grove pressed on with their spec build strategy. When complete, the development will have generated more jobs than the number lost when the old cable factory closed. Completion of the inner ring road, building the A50, the Royal Derby Hospital, Quad, Joseph Wright Centre, Frygate Studios and so on. There is quite a lot more mark-making change we have seen over the last 25 years. But while city living and student accommodation are flavours of the month, I think it would be appropriate to end by looking at the leisure industry and in particular hotels and restaurants. We have seen the arrival of Jury's Inn, 3 Premier Inns, a Travel Lodge, a Penta, a Holiday Inn and a Holiday Inn Express, along with the Cathedral Quarter Hotel. Who would have thought we needed so many beds? No longer is the Pennine Hotel Derby's premier traveller's rest. Pretty much at the same time, we saw the restaurant sector boil over. When Wagamama opened in Derby, they were followed by Byron, Carluccio's, Turtle Bay and Cosy Club. Wowee, national restaurant brands. But there is one I had a hand in that I think has made a real difference to Derby's food and drink offer. No chains here, except another local independent business which works hard to deliver its unique offer and exceptional service. A business of which Derby can be proud. Yes, you've guessed it. It's back to regeneration, and the project I consider has made the biggest mark, well, on me at least. My wife's 7 restaurant here on Pride Park. I'm really proud of what she's achieved and what Derby's done too.